It all started in March 2018 at the South by Southwest Festival in Austin, Texas. Bernie Sanders was giving a speech, and InfoWars had street reporters on the scene, including Ashton Whitty, who was going around asking people why they support Bernie Sanders. As Ashton was making the rounds, she came across a woman dressed in a sailor outfit. This was Dasha Nekrasova, aspiring actress, filmmaker, and future host of the Red Scare podcast. As is InfoWars' MO, Ashton probably intended to make a fool of Dasha, but that's not exactly how it went. Here's a glimpse of how the interaction went down.
Well, for example, you know Venezuela, right?
Heard of it.
A majority of the country is currently eating rats.
Oh my god. You people have like worms in your brain, honestly.
After InfoWars posted the video on YouTube, it went softly viral, as Dasha puts it, leading to the birth of Dasha's nickname, Sailor Socialism. InfoWars removed the video from their YouTube channel, leading Dasha to repost the video on Twitter on May 2nd of 2018. This is when Sailor Socialism really started to go viral. As of today, the clip on Twitter has been viewed 7.3 million times, receiving 85,000 likes and over 20,000 retweets. Within the next few days, Dasha Nekrasova was interviewed by Teen Vogue and Vice, and a clip from the video also appeared on Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. The original InfoWars video was recorded on March 9th, 2018, and the first episode of the Red Scare podcast was uploaded on March 28th of that same year. Looking at Red Scare's Patreon earnings over time, you can see that their growth was slow and steady throughout their first month, gaining about 100 patrons by the end of April. But then growth ramped up drastically, and they were able to more than quadruple their number of patrons by the end of May. If you've been paying attention, you might notice that the sudden increase in growth coincides perfectly with Dasha's viral tweet with the Sailor Socialism video. Funny how that works out. But Dasha Nekrasova isn't the only host of the Red Scare podcast. The Red Scare podcast is co-hosted by Khachiyan, and there was also a third host for the first few months of the show, but Meg Murnane quietly left the show in October 2018. It's not known exactly why she left, and rumors are abound in the fandom, but according to Dasha and Anna, Meg's departure was amicable. Anyway, yeah, I think it's safe to say that Dasha's virality with the whole Sailor Socialism thing is largely responsible for the Red Scare podcast's early rise to fame, but I think most fans would agree that Anna Khachiyan is essential to the show's continued success. But before we get into that, what is the Red Scare podcast even about? And why do so many people either love it or hate it? First of all, let's get this out of the way. The Red Scare podcast has very little to do with Russia. Both hosts were born in the Soviet Union but raised in the US, and that's why the podcast is named what it is. Okay, so the Red Scare podcast is considered to be a part of the Dirtbag Left, which is a loosely defined collection of podcasts generally characterized by anti-political correctness and support for Bernie Sanders. Other podcasts often included under the Dirtbag Left label are Chapo Trap House, Street Fight Radio, and Town. I haven't listened to most of the Dirtbag Left podcasts, but I have heard the Red Scare podcast be referred to as the girl version of Town, and I don't think that description is quite right. While the two podcasts have collaborated a fair amount, and Dasha was even engaged to Adam Friedland for some time, the Red Scare podcast takes on a decidedly more intellectual tone. Don't get me wrong, humor is definitely a part of the Red Scare podcast, but if I were to describe the Red Scare podcast, I would say it's two New York City art chicks providing cultural commentary with a contrarian bent and plenty of vocal fry.
It was a very nihilistic garment all around, yeah.
A profile in The Cut described the show as representing a critique of feminism and capitalism from deep inside the culture they've spawned. Red Scare's guests seem to be a mixture of journalists and artists, and each episode's topics of discussion tend to revolve around the cultural and political happenings of the day. While the hosts do joke around a lot, the show is at its most interesting when they speak in earnest. Amidst the grating vocal fry and petty condescension that could only come from a feminine perspective, both hosts, but especially Anna Khachiyan, often present surprisingly insightful analysis that might make you simultaneously think conflicting thoughts like, "That's so true," and "I can't believe someone would say such a thing." But they never really take themselves seriously enough for listeners to get the impression that they believe in the controversial things they're saying with 100% certainty. And it's this subtle balance between contrarian insightfulness and self-aware indifference that keeps fans coming back for more. Of course, not everyone who decides to check out the Red Scare podcast comes away from the experience as a fan. The show has a lot of haters, and that's probably to be expected. Khachiyan and Dasha Nekrasova constantly deride what they refer to as neoliberalism, a term Dasha has defined as a catch-all for a total conflation of political life and zero-sum ruthlessness of social life. The pair have criticized aspects of the Me Too movement on multiple occasions, and they seem to more or less outright reject identity politics in favor of a more class-conscious approach. All of that is probably enough to draw rampant ire from critics with mainstream sensibilities, but recent actions by the Red Scare ladies may be causing some of their core fan base to turn against them as well. Throughout most of the Red Scare podcast's life, the show has seen a continual increase in listenership and subscribers on Patreon. Not only has the growth of the Red Scare fanbase continued, but the rate of growth of the fanbase has steadily increased as well. But that all might be changing. Support for the show peaked on March 21st, 2022, with 13,811 patrons donating $59,691 per month. Since then, the number of Patreon supporters has been steadily declining. As of the current date, 6 months after the peak, the Red Scare podcast has 12,528 patrons with total monthly earnings of $54,760. Obviously, the girls aren't exactly hurting for cash, but this decline is significant. Throughout the first 4 years of the show's existence, Red Scare only saw increases in every metric. The past 6 months has been the first sustained period of decline for the show, and it's happening at a fairly dramatic rate. So what gives?
Yeah, we're right-wing now.
Right-wing.
First we were in socialists, and now we're...
From the very beginning, the Red Scare podcast was always loosely affiliated with left-wing politics and socialism, but over the past several months, many listeners have started to believe that Anna and Dasha are shifting more and more toward the right. Sometime around the start of Red Scare's recent decline, Dasha Nekrasova began to speak more and more about her Catholicism, which seems to rub some listeners the wrong way. Many have accused Dasha of LARPing, essentially claiming that she is insincerely adopting the aesthetics of Catholicism as part of a trend. And apparently it is trendy in Manhattan right now to convert to Catholicism, which is something I just learned about. Anyway, perhaps more damaging to Red Scare's reputation came with a Vanity Fair article that was released on April 20th, 2022. This article revealed that Khachiyan had met with Peter Thiel and Blake Masters. If you don't know, Peter Thiel is an outspoken conservative billionaire known for donating large sums of money to right-wing causes, and Blake Masters is a Republican nominee for the 2022 U.S. Senate election in Arizona. Anyway, in the article, Masters was asked whether Thiel would ever fund the Red Scare podcast, and he responded, "Maybe, yeah." Anna and Dasha both vehemently deny that they've received any funding from Peter Thiel, but some listeners are skeptical. A close Peter Thiel ally, Curtis Yarvin, appeared as a guest on the show as recently as July of 2022, and the Thiel Bucks allegations have caused some listeners to reevaluate past guest appearances from controversial figures such as Alex Jones and Steve Bannon. Anyway, regardless of what you think about Khachiyan and Dasha Nekrasova, the rapid rise and the cultural impact of the Red Scare podcast can't be ignored. It'll be interesting to see how they weather their current controversies. Will their recent decline in support just be a small hiccup, or is this the beginning of the end? If you enjoyed this look into the world of the Red Scare podcast, I'm pretty sure you'll like this video too.